Good morning. Hello, Big Blue World. This is Britt Boles. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Blue Biographies. This is episode number 9 with Doug Baulos. Doug, did I say your last name right? I didn't double check with you.
You didn't. My name is Doug Baulos. I use the pronouns he or him. Yeah.
Excellent. Doug Baulos. This is our first time meeting, and I'm so honored to meet with you, to chat with you, to hear your story. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everyone joining us live in the Facebook group. If you're not familiar with the series, this is a Seed to Pigment story series. So we are witnessing the personal stories of indigo dyers, indigo growers, indigo farmers around the globe. And I'm really honored to chat with y'all. So Doug, let's get into it. Will you tell everyone just where you're from, what kind of indigo you grow, what you do, a little bit about where you live?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Illinois. I've lived in Alabama for about 30 years now. I am a queer artist from Alabama. I teach at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, which is where my dye garden is. I've grown many types of indigo, but I grow mostly Persicaria now.
Excellent, excellent. And so you're growing there at the university garden this year?
Yes, I first got the dye garden about, I think it was in 2009, so that was about 11 years ago. And
Okay.
I've grown indigo. I'd only grown it at my house before that. So I started out in pots, kind of like you, because I used to live in a condo, and I had this back deck, and I would grow it in pots the first time I grew it. Yeah. But for about 11 years, there's this one whole part of my dye garden that's indigo.
Excellent. And so was the school initiating this, or did you initiate the dye garden? Was it part of a class that you were teaching? What instigated that?
It's tied to 2 classes that I have curriculum for that revolves around natural dyes and processes. One is a hybrid materials class, and one is a book arts class. So both of those classes work with the dye garden. And UAB has a garden, a pretty big community garden that's open to any employees or staff or faculty members, and you just have to apply. And since I had previously worked with the UAB Office of Sustainability so much, I kind of had an in. So I got immediately like these 4 spaces. So, and everybody, I think, like, not that anybody ever goes to my dye garden because I'm kind of weird about that, but like, it's not huge, you know, like it's basically these 4 very large raised beds. It's basically so, yeah.
That's wonderful. Do the students actively participate in the planting, or do they just participate in the harvesting, or what aspect do they have?
do parts of all of it. And I also have a lot of students from surrounding universities that come to both my dye garden. And also, I'm really lucky because since I'm a research professor, I have a huge studio that's in downtown Birmingham. So I can host, like, you know, like last summer, I hosted like a huge class of students from the other Alabama university in Tuscaloosa. So they all came for multiple days and made paper and found out how to make an indigo vat and how to use natural dyes and all kinds of things. So.
That's really special that they have access to the plant growing right there, you know, on the school property, and that you get to really, they get to be a part of the seed to pigment journey too. So they must become really invested in that, yes?
Some of them do. And some of them, like, I think it's very transformative for them. And like a lot of them have gone on to grad school and have continued stuff. And the other exciting thing is that since UAB gave me that dye garden, it's kind of given me like a model. So like when I have a show like at a museum or an art center, I'm like, hey, if I'm having a show, why don't you guys start a dye garden? You have all this outdoor space. And so like I've actually gotten 3 different Alabama art centers and museums to start dye gardens, which is really, really fun, you know?
Yeah, how impactful for people to go to a show, you know, to view art and see the origin, the source.
Yeah, so I have to give a big shout out to everybody on Facebook, because usually I do like a Facebook birthday fundraiser, and it's amazing how many people will be like, I'll give money to start a dye garden at that place, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. So it's so
Oh,
great.
wow. Oh, that's wonderful. So it really is a communal effort in every aspect.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah. Well, will you tell us just a little bit about your cultivation rhythm? Like, when do you start seeds there in Alabama? What's your growing zone?
That is a good question. I think we're 7A, but I should know that because I used to work at a kind of famous nursery in Alabama.
We can look it up. We can look it up.
I think we're 7A, but basically, I could plant really easily indoors, but I sow almost exclusively right into the ground. And so
Okay.
I usually wait for the first full moon of March. And it's never, frost has never been an issue for me. The weird thing is that I can never really predict when I'm gonna harvest indigo the first time, because sometimes it happens much faster than other times. So I have to kind of watch it. So like right now I could probably go harvest, but it hasn't gone full into flower yet. Like my Tango Cosmos, I did the first harvest. Oh, is this like the Facebook group we're not supposed to talk about other plants? Or
That is, I totally want to know what else you're growing.
oh,
I totally do. That's on my list. It is.
okay, yeah. So like I harvested Cosmos yesterday. I grow that Tango Cosmos, which I think,
Yes, the bright orange one. So
yeah,
beautiful.
it's
So
huge right
beautiful.
now. So.
Yeah. So I want to know, just because we have chatted a little bit about this, a little bit more about your cycles and following the moon, and that the importance of um, seeding and maybe even harvesting. Are you following a lunar schedule?
I do follow a lunar schedule. So like I follow a lunar schedule for planting and for harvesting. I also follow a lunar schedule for my meditation practice. So like when the moon is full, like I really meditate on what I have that's ample in my life and what I could possibly, then as it wanes, I say, okay, in my meditation, what can I get rid of, or what do I need to say I'm ready to let go, and things like that. But also just the way I grew up, like, like my ancestors, they would have never done anything outside of the lunar cycle. So like
Mm-hmm.
I always have to look it up in the almanac, but like sometimes it's weird because I'll just like intuitively know, or like, and the other day I think I can't remember if it was on your page, but somebody was talking about how when they harvest like during the day, and I was like, it wasn't about indigo. I think it was about mullein, and like, I would never harvest mullein after 6 a.m. in the morning. Like I always do that like right before the sun comes up, and I don't
Uh-huh.
even know where that comes from sometimes. Like if it was my grandmother, I had this grandmother that was really influenced me. So, or maybe if Gwen told me that, or whatever.
Yeah. Or or partially intuitive. It's always a mix, right? I feel like it's a mix of
Yeah,
people you
that's not
know.
intuitive though, because like I know with like certain plants, like herbalists for thousands of years have always said like these are the ones that you have to pick, before the
Sure.
sun is actually full in the sky and things like that. And there's
Yes.
of course real reasons, because some things won't harm the plant as much if the temperature is more static. And I think it was you that I was talking to about like holy basil and like how it calms. And so I really believe like you need to learn what things can be calmed by your actions and what you don't want to do anything harsh to. Whereas other things, it's okay to do that. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a balance and things like
Yeah, there's so many rhythms to the season, to the lunar calendar, and then each plant, right? I think is what you're speaking to, right? Has its own little rhythm. So even the potency of the plant itself, whether or not it's been a string of sunny days prior to harvesting,
that.
or
Yeah.
if it's been raining, or yeah, the time actually is interesting because I believe it was John Marshall. He talks a lot about picking indigo in the early morning, as early as possible, which isn't always possible for me or practical for my personal schedule, but it would be really interesting. I don't know if you've done any comparisons from picking indigo earlier in the day or later in the day.
I
Do you have?
don't pick anything like indigo or herbs or anything like that after 9 a.m. in the morning. I would never do that. But
Okay.
like okra, when I go out to pick okra, like I would pick that at any time of day. So like I
Right.
think probably John Marshall is just he's realizing like if especially with me, because like in my zone, I can pick indigo and not destroy the plant and it will come right back. So like I'll have a second harvest, especially if I get it before it fully flowers, et cetera, et cetera. But like, so I'm really careful about that because like it gets really hot here and I don't have irrigation per se, like I have access to water, but
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, what are the average temperatures there, and how do you keep the indigo from, it does love a lot of water, right? So how do you go about keeping it moist and watered?
You visit and you water and like I water very early in the morning or
Okay.
very late at night and stuff.
Hmm.
So it's really great when I'm there at night because um, it can sit with the water for a while, so um,
So
but
it's not
it's not like during
evaporating.
quarantine I'm lucky because I have a colleague that only lives a block from the dye garden, so she is actually taking care of the watering for me because I don't live near there, and our university hasn't opened. Like they haven't said it's cool for us to be there, but I just sneak over to the dye garden because it's
Yeah.
outside.
You can't abandon those plants. That's a necessity. I feel like
Yeah,
that's a vital
yeah.
necessity for
But
sure.
also it's been fun because I planted indigo for the first time in like 7 years at my house. So I have some raised beds.
Mm.
I have a bunch of pots outside and
Okay, okay. That's wonderful. And when do you said you can't always anticipate when you'll do your first harvest. Do you
I
have
mean
plans to
it's
do it
coming
soon?
up. So yeah, I'm guessing for some reason I put June 17th on the calendar, but
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's right around the corner.
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you'll be processing your leaves, if you'll be drying them, if you will be,
You mean this year? This
I want
year?
you to talk about the pantyhose and the dried leaves.
Oh, I think Aaron, who's going to be on in 2 weeks, was looking at my pantyhose the other day because he came to my. I'm really lucky because I was able to turn my 2-car garage into just a dye studio. So I
Okay.
have dye stuff at my studio downtown, but since I've been quarantined, I set up my garage so that friends can come and other people that just want to learn about dyes can come, and it's all very socially distant. So half the garage is theirs and half the garage is mine, and I think Aaron was
Wonderful.
asking about the pantyhose, but like I learned that trick from Gwen, and Gwen was I have to give a shout out to Gwen Jones. She passed away many years ago, but she
Mhm.
was the first person that ever put my hands into an indigo vat, and she is
Um,
not a well-known person, but she came to an art show I had in Southern Alabama, and she said, "Hey, would you like to visit me on the farm on your way back to Birmingham? I would love for you to see the plants I grow." And of course, I went. And she was she was a black farmer, kind of a granny herbalist, and we both knew about this woman named Emma Dupree, who if I don't know if you know who that is, but Emma
yes, I
Dupree
do.
was she was a huge influence on me, and
Mhm.
it's important that we lift up um, black people in our lives. And I never met Emma Dupree, but she was this one, just this amazing woman that was a kind of a granny herbalist, is what they called her. But I first learned about goldenrod dyeing from her, and I kind of fell in love with it because of her. And she had this amazing meditation that she did where she would open her practice, which she didn't do natural dyes, but she had an herbal midwifery practice. And she would say, like, you don't have to pay me, but here is a list of things that almost anybody has that you could bring when we did stuff. So like that's how I've set up my collaborations and practice. Like I don't, I would never ask for payment for anything, or like, and I all the time make, like yardage and paper for artists that live in Alabama. Um, but like I don't ask for anything. I'll just say like, hey, if you have a couple lidded, like coffee filters or vinegar or lidded mason jars, just bring that stuff, and then you can see the practice. And then if you want to donate other stuff, and people are so generous, and like I've just met the most amazing farmers and just people that way. Besides forming really deep relationships with artists and stuff like that, it's important because everybody, like as an artist that shows his work a lot in different places, like I think people are always like, wow, you chose to live in Alabama. And I was like, I love Alabama, and I'm tired of people stereotyping Alabama. Like it's crazy, and Alabama's beautiful. It's one of the most biodiverse places in the world, and like there's amazing people here. There's of course there's horrible things here, but I am like unapologetically positive about Alabama. Even as a queer person, like I'm sorry, I love Alabama.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing those really lovely stories. That connection with meeting the indigo for the first time, I think is such a special moment, and
Yes.
everyone can trace back their first meeting.
Yeah,
So
and that was a very long time ago. So I think that was probably in the mid '90s, and
okay.
I think that was I'd only been to Japan once, and I had a very big indigo experience when I was in Cambodia and Laos, which was like the mid '90s. After that and stuff like that, so that's when I really got interested. And I think we've spoken because like I lived in Mexico, in southern Mexico for a long time, and the indigo culture there is amazing between Guatemala coming all the way up to Mexico, and so like I saw indigo all the time, but I wasn't really involved in it, even as a paper maker in Mexico, because I've been a paper maker forever. But like that was not one of the dyes that typically I would have worked with back then or learned, because I worked with a fiber that's called a mate, and now there's some people that are indigo dyeing mate, but I don't remember ever seeing that when I first learned about paper making in San Cristobal and in Puebla and places like that.
And what is mate?
A mate is the bast fiber of a tree. So like in Alabama, we have 5 different species of mulberry trees, and it's one of the reasons why Alabama is heaven for paper makers, because like as far as you can say, like the prized paper fiber of Japan, well, we have that tree and it grows everywhere. So like it's really easy for me to harvest and process. It's not easy, but like it's everywhere. I just found a whole bunch in along an old railroad. I live in Irondale, Irondale, Alabama, which if you guys have ever seen that movie Fried Green Tomatoes,
Yes.
like I live right by the gray house in that movie, and the whistle stop is only 2 blocks from my house. So like when Aaron and Tim came the other day, we went and ate fried green tomatoes, and we actually got it and brought it back because I'm not eating in restaurants yet. But yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's really lovely to put you.
And I forgot to warn you, there might be a train that comes by during our interview.
That's wonderful. Oh, I hope so. We'll get the full experience.
Yeah.
The full fried green tomato Alabama experience. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, that's wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about this paper connection. And you mentioned, doing paper for a very long time, longer than you've known or been working with indigo. Can you tell us a little bit more about your paper making experiences? And then also tell us a little bit about the intersection for you between indigo and paper.
Yeah, sure. And I have always used paper, like even though like my Master of Fine Arts after undergrad school, when I went to get my terminal degree, it was in drawing and painting. I've never worked on anything but paper or sometimes found objects, but I've always had like just a real attraction to paper and paper making. And I had to teach myself paper making after I lived in Mexico because when I went to school in America, no one actually taught paper making at any of the schools I went to. So I had to learn it. And I will just say for anybody that's interested in paper making, like I was in grad school and making paper making out of a blend, making paper out of a blender because I didn't have access to a beater. And now I have a beautiful, 2-pound beater that's amazing. And I've had it for like 7 or 8 years, but like I showed all over the place before I even had a real beater. And so like it was really great for me to live in Mexico and learn the old way of making paper because obviously they don't have a
Sure.
beater. And in India and in Cambodia, they don't even make paper like they make it in lakes where they like take part of the lake or the river and they dam it off. And then they actually put the fiber in there and wade into the river and do it. So like people are always like thinking you need all this technology, which a little technology helps, like that. I'm always laughing because Brittany knows like I'm like everybody just go ahead and get the pH tester. Don't use the strips. Get the actual thing.
Yeah, there's a beauty in the
It's
advances.
amazing, right? Yeah. I was like, oh my God. Remember that when I first used pH strips. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the accessibility though, because we sometimes just forget or take for granted that, of course, we haven't had those tools.
Yeah.
They're really recent tools, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also like all the people that have really influenced my life and like as far as like articulating my deepest concerns about what it means to be human, sometimes you really have to think like, is technology in the way of my conversation about the deepest roots of what I want to articulate in my artwork? And so like that's a big thing for me because, like when people approach your work, it has to have a certain aura and a certain texture to it for me. And I think that's what I've been successful about is like really asking complicated questions about that. So, but on the other hand, it's really great to have a beater because I can make like a huge amount of paper and give it away to communities and to people and not have to worry about it, which, it's really different. So I'm really
Yeah.
lucky at that. Yeah.
I love that question that you ask yourself in your process. And it's a great question for really anyone to ask is technology in the way or is it aiding? Like it has the power to do both. And
Yeah. I always say like, sometimes when I'm teaching like week-long workshops, I talk about the first day, like, and I think this is very good for us to talk about is that like, when you're drinking, because I'm a huge tea drinker, like it's a problem. It's not a problem, but I drink all these different teas and I love it. And like, have you ever been around somebody and they made you a cup of tea in their house and they put it in like a styrofoam to go thing? Like when you were sitting at, like I'm just like, what is happening? Like, and so like I think it's you have to worry about technology, but you also have to worry about, you know, a lot of other questions, like what's the flip side of that. And like just as far as like me learning from Gwen and Emma Dupree, like they had no technology basically, really. And like when I lived in Mexico, when I would talk to herbalists, especially like I knew this one Maya woman who talked to me a lot about stuff, and she was just amazing because she had a hot plate, and her whole basically herbal practice was done with a hot plate, and that was it. So she didn't even have a stove. So.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something really beautiful about connecting directly with the source and finding out different ways. And that's what's so beautiful about indigo is each culture that has an indigo bearing plant has discovered their own unique way to interact directly with the source at a level that's so uh, without technology, right?
Right.
without
And
modern
also,
advancements.
and different artists use
Yeah.
indigo in such different ways, and that's what's amazing about their, authenticity. So,
Yeah.
as long as you're authentic to yourself and you become deeply involved, and I don't mean that it has to be complicated, but like I think a lot of people that I talk to, like they struggle with things, and I'm like, I'm not sure this is actually something you should be even struggling with. Like, if it's part of your authenticity and you're feeling called to do it, as long as you're respectful of its past and you're acknowledging the culture that preceded you, and like I'm big about upcycling and things, just because I don't see how we can go on, buying clothes the way we do, and like it's just awful. So like that's a really great opportunity for me to work into workshops and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something I think about a lot. But
Yeah.
pay attention to the patterns in your life and what patterns need to change, and which ones might be what I call, like, nursing home patterns. Like, I'm going to be sitting in my nursing home still doing this and still thinking about this. And
Oh, interesting. Yeah. What stays with you?
yeah, the last time I was in, not the last time, but 4 years ago when I was in Japan, I had the show, and my friend Masahiro, who I was in grad school with in New Orleans, lives in Japan, and he came and got me, and he wanted me to meet his teacher, and his teacher does these amazing little calligraphy, tiny little calligraphy landscapes, like the size of a matchbox, and is pretty well known. And so anyway, we were sitting there waiting to have lunch, and there were some tourists buying some things, and one of the tourists said, like, "How old are you?" And his teacher goes, "I'm 93," and then the husband goes, "Well, when are you going to retire? Like, you're 93 and you're still just doing this." And man, he did not miss a beat. The teacher just turned to him and said, "I'm just now getting kind of okay with it." And I was like, "I'm just now getting kind of good at it." And I was like, "Oh my God, that is me." Like, all, because that's how I always think. And I just love that guy. Like, he didn't even think about it. He's like, "I'm just now getting pretty good at it."
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really beautiful to commit a lifetime to something uh, that is so vast, really, or that you're committing to its vastness. That
Well,
you feel like you'll never reach the end of it. It's an
yeah.
endless.
And
Mhm.
that's isn't that what we are all kind of like drawn to about indigo, is the
Yes.
mystery of the indigo vat? It's just like, well, there's an underlying unity to it all to me. Like, that's really fascinating, but the mystery of it is amazing, like,
Mhm.
and I just love that about art, like processes that you don't know what's going to happen, and so
Yeah. I really appreciate the way you draw people into the mystery of indigo and other dye plants and other processes through your imagery. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about maybe even some of the pieces you have behind you? I wanted to tell everyone about this piece. I have an original piece behind me right here, Kitsu, and this is done with black walnut, yes?
that is actually kakishibu. That's a green persimmon dye.
Oh, this is, okay. This is beautiful.
So
So
green persimmon is, if like in the South, it's the Chinese persimmon. It's not the natural persimmon, but like you would pick the green persimmons now, or like I'm really lucky because I have a network of friends that they there's a lot of persimmons that naturally fall to the ground before they're ripe. So they'll put them in their freezer. Like, they're so nice. They'll put them in a freezer for me in a Ziploc bag and just
uh,
keep adding the persimmons until they eat all the ripe ones. And
okay.
so like a green persimmon, you can brew, and if you think an indigo vat is time consuming, the kakishibu vat, you have to brew it for 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years, or some people in Japan do it for 7 years. I've never done one for um, 7, but I have one that's coming up on 5 years. So I'm
Wow.
really excited. I think I'm going to go ahead and finish it this year. So it should be really nice. And so that, you know how like you talked a lot about it, so I won't go into the like indigo, the molecularly how it attracts oxygen, blah blah blah, changes color. So kakishibu is very much the same. So like when you're dyeing with kakishibu, it's one color, but then you put it out in the sun and it gets sun charged, and you can literally see over time, like of a couple of hours, that it deepens like so significantly. So
Wow.
that's why they talk about you have to sun charge green persimmon dye and things like that.
Okay.
And I have found that that is kind of true with yellow dock. Do you guys have that, the dock plant?
We do have dock, yes.
Okay, so like the root of the dock plant, that's another one that really changes over time. And so like these pieces are kind of a collaboration with a professor that I met about a year ago named Sherry Schumacher, who's on Instagram.
Okay.
But what we did, a lot of times what I'll do with Alabama artists is that like once they've decided they want to work with me, I'll just say like, I can either give you just a certain amount of things, or we can actually enter in a collaboration, which my collaborative way is that I'll just say like, I want you to give me prompts or send me images and say like, you know, so Sherry sent me like some prompts about, mostly about like the diversity of plant life and some other things. And so I started making fabric for her. And so I was doing a lot of like kind of really complicated Hebrew marbling with natural dyes for her because she was really into certain things. And I was like, I think I can do that with marbling. But then I sent her a picture I had taken in Hale County, which is where the Gee Band quilters are kind of near. And I was visiting this farm, and they had an old building, and there was just a roof, part of the roof had caved in. And I just saw this amazing old galvanized piece of tin that was still silver, very rusted, but also the blue was reflecting on it. And I was like, that looks like crazy something happened in an indigo vat or a rust, like an echo printing. And I was like, I bet I could make that. And so like I got real involved in that. So she actually just sent me this. So like I'm gonna start piecing on it, and we're both really into pine cones, which I know is really weird, but like yeah. So we have an idea and we're working on it. So she took the second option, and so we've collaborated a lot. And I'm working right now in a collaborative way with about 4 Alabama artists. But this year I've already probably given materials to about 12 Alabama artists. It varies from year to year, and it varies like, you know, like I don't give it to high school artists, but anybody that's an adult that reaches out to me, I try to work with them. And a lot of them are not, you know, like some of like I'm about to meet tomorrow with a civil rights activist that just wants to do something and had this idea, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I can make that happen. So like we're gonna meet tomorrow, and they're gonna start this project. I'm excited about that. Where they're gonna upcycle T-shirts, and they were asking me questions. I was like, I think I can think of like 3 ways we could do it. So it'll be exciting.
That's really beautiful. And it sounds like what you're doing is really starting this conversation with local artists. And then there's this beautiful melding of both of your voices, you know, collaboratively being represented in the art that you do together. I love collaboration. It's one of my favorite words. So I'm really excited to see all of these new collaborations come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little more reclusive than some people, and like I have to save my energy for teaching and for like exhibiting, because a lot of my installations take a lot of emotional and physical energy, and plus I'm a queer person, so like I have to be careful and have some, you know, things up. But it's been great, and like and it's been amazing. I'm not even gonna lie. I've loved it. So
That it's a really potent thing to do too, especially with you know, just the present moment that we're in. I feel like it's so important to acknowledge like where we are right now, and so, you know, using the voices that are collectively rising right now, the importance of discussing race and racism, the importance of discussing our history, importance of discussing how we can really amplify voices in multiple ways. And art has always been a really impactful way to hear voices, you know, throughout history. So
and not just art, but like one of the things I do when I'm not teaching just a day-long workshop, but when I'm actually teaching like at Penland or, you know, like, I mean, everything's canceled this summer, but like if I have a week, the first thing I do a lot of times is I talk about like what practices in your life are meditation, and then over here, what practices are enlivening activities. So like these are things that you feel safe doing, that you know a lot about, that you can think in a very complicated way about because maybe you have a history with it, blah, blah, blah. But these are things that might be more experimental, but also they might be enlivening. They might be what you need. And like right now, we don't need to meditate on issues. We need to maybe stretch ourselves to be uncomfortable and have some enlivening activities and protests. And I think that's so important that people start thinking about that in a complicated way, because there's so many ways you can enliven your community, and collaboration for me is one of the ones that anybody could collaborate, you know, and it could be a very simple thing. It doesn't have to be like a big deal, you know.
Right.
It could be sending someone a letter, or calling your government.
Yes. Calling, voting, any act. Yeah. I really love the way you describe that. Enlivening acts. It is a really heightened time, and we've been in a really meditative space because of, you know, the shelter in place. We've been kind of forced to be very introspective, and now the wind is shifting, the time is shifting, the energy is shifting into, I think, what you described so well as enlivening acts. I really like that way of thinking about it.
And it doesn't, you don't have to think about it as a polemic thing. Like they're not separate things. They could all be balanced and be counterparts and feed off of each other. And,
sure. Yeah, just like the seasons, right? There's the planting of the indigo seed and then the harvesting of the indigo seed. To come full circle back to that, we mentioned you drying your leaves, and we didn't actually fully get into that story. Will you tell us a little bit
because
more?
like I guess, well, you and I have talked on Instagram about how I learned how to do Tsukumo, because like when I first learned it in Japan, I you know, a lot of times, like typically it's rare that I have more than 200 plants. And a lot of people have always talked about how you need a huge amount of mass of leaves to do it. And I use my garage my garage floor as a way to dry and do the things. And then I don't do a lot, but I do it in a very specific type of cooler, which I think I've talked to you before. I use ceramic plaster, and I coat the sides of the cooler, and then I pour ceramic plaster about 4 to 5 inches deep in the cooler. And then when the lid's on it, it basically becomes this thing that is perfect for composting, because it keeps everything moving in the same way that it was in the field being composted in Japan. And I just learned, because it regulates and evens out the composting. So, you know, like, because typically I'll like spray it with water like once a day and turn it, and that's it. So it's not real. I mean, yes, it has to stay in there for a long time, but it's really not that big a deal, you know. So like, and I learned that's like a thing ceramicists use so that their ceramics won't dry out too quickly. And that was just purely intuition on my part. I was just like, I wonder if this works, and it really did work. And it's amazing how well it worked. And like, because I think a lot of people on the feed, they do a lot with dried leaves, which I have done too, but I only have done aqueous extraction with dried leaves. Okay. So like I've never tried any, you know, like to put dried leaves right into a vat or anything like that, you know.
Doing a direct vat, yeah. So how long does your Tsukumo typically, Is there a range?
There's not like a calendar amount of time, but you kind of know if you've seen it, like when it's ready. And like it's different because like I don't like to say how many days it's going to take because it's a while. I think it's been as long as 60 days in that thing for me. But like also Alabama has consistently weathered between 95 and 105. So like if that thing's out in there, like it's consistently warm. Whereas like somewhere where you were, I don't know what that would be like. It's just like anything else. Like when you probably have the same thing doing your bath, it's different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many factors, even in the aqueous extraction. In your case, it might take maybe even a day or two, or it might take 5 or 6 days for me. Just
oh God, it's never taken more than 2 days because I never do it in the fall. Like typically, a lot of times I'll do my if I'm doing an aqueous extraction, I'll do that very early, like in June, and
okay.
and I'm really lucky because yeah, and you and I should talk about cleaning aqueous extraction pigment sometimes. Like we probably don't have time for that conversation today, but
Yeah.
that's something I've been really experimenting with the glabra root, which when I grew up, my grandfather kept that root in his refrigerator and drank it. Do you know that? It's
I don't know this root.
Licorice root or?
Oh, licorice root.
Yeah.
Oh,
the root of the glabra plant. Yeah. And so like my grandfather's family is from Avignon, which is in the very south of France. And so it's like, if you've ever heard of like pastis, which is like a French aperitif, like it's a licorice thing.
Yeah.
In the summertime, you make like pitchers, instead of putting like mint in the pitcher or cucumbers, they put glabra or licorice root in there, and it makes this herbal like tonic. And so like that's what I've been using to clean my pigment with, because I was like, it's slightly antiseptic in a weird way. And I just a couple of years ago, I was just like, would this work? And sure enough, like sometimes when I show people my pigment, they're like, what in the world? That is so blue. Like it gets really clean. It's like, it's kind of amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. But I'm still experimenting with others. I think because I talked to you earlier in the text about experimenting with holy basil and stuff as a way to make vats and stuff. So it's fun to have all these experiments. And I love the extraction group, even though I'm not like technically I'm just not in that headspace where I technically worry about things. I just try to do them, I will freely admit. But I've been doing it for a long time, so it usually works. But like I love, especially like Deborah and some other people it's amazing to me that we all came to the same weird ass conclusions. Like, like down to like, what do I have in my house that would work for? I never heard of the oil filter, which I can't wait to, because I use the same thing I think you use, which I used an old silk screen. But when I heard about the oil filter, I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I ever think of that? But then somebody was talking about like how they winnow their seeds and stuff like that, and almost methodically, or what, like every tool she used was not something you might use, but it was exactly the conclusion I had come to. And also, like somebody was talking about alternatives to a fructose vat, and like I do the same thing this other woman said, where like I go to, you guys have Aldi's out there? It's like a discount supermarket.
We don't have that store, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but anyway, like I'll go there and they'll have big boxes of dates, and I make my own date smoothie, and that's what I use instead of fructose. So like, and some other woman on the internet said she did the same thing, and I was like, I just think that's weird, but it also makes sense because like if you cook and baking, that dates are going to add a lot of sweetness, and so I'm sure she followed the same intuition that I did. But
yeah,
it's so fun. Yeah.
It is so fun. It's so fun to see, especially reducers. I feel like there have to be thousands of them, thousands of options, and everyone has one near them. I'm convinced that everyone has like a local one, something that they can access to. Even in the city, there's food waste that can be used
Yeah.
as a reducer, and it's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
I don't have oyster shells anyway, so that's
Yeah,
out.
oyster
But-
shells are tough. The
But
alkaline.
also, I think the cool thing about it is that when because like people always talk about like, oh, you know, I don't think other people are so endemically tied to their environment, you know, like where they're really looking. But the thing is that I'm only doing that because it's part of my authenticity. Like I feel like I'm building my authenticity when I'm not having to reach far away to get something. And like, you know, like I definitely have a high horse about people that travel all over the world and fly and bring in natural dyes from other places. Like that's fine for some people, but I only use things from Alabama. And like I won't use anything that's not sustainably harvested and stuff like that. And that's why I started my dye garden, because I was like, I can't order indigo, you know, like I mean you could, and I don't have anything if other people do it. But for me, I really wanted it to be part of my authenticity, which leads to me understanding it in a different way. And maybe not even a better way, you know, like I'm not even going to say that, but it's my way of understanding things.
Okay.
So like I've been appreciating how many people really, like you were talking about, especially like when we're batting, like just playing around with reducers and different reducers. And like I think that's such a positive thing. So you can get the reducer that you want to use. And like I know it's boring, but I really have come up with this idea of this one type of iron vat that people can DM me about. But it's a typical 123 iron vat, but it's like I do it because one of the processes I do in textile is this thing where I kind of make like a weird bastardized cyanotype thing, and then I expose a photographic image, and then I get rid of the cyanotype, and I want to float in indigo or other natural dyes. And so what I had to do was I had to figure out how can I make a cyanotype bath that actually has indigo in it and actually can and stuff. And then I get rid of it, and then I float stuff back in, and but it works. I mean, for me, for my purpose, it has worked out. But I wouldn't ever, you know, like it's weird, right?
That's amazing. I want to take that class. I want to come and play with you. That particularly is really interesting to me, that you really embody, enjoy this practice of not just collaborating with other people, but collaborating other methods, maybe non-traditional methods, you know, in and really infusing them into how can I connect this to natural dyes. And I feel like that's the intimacy that you're talking about, where you want that direct connection. You want that intimacy with the tools that you're using, with the dye stuffs, with the materials that you're sourcing, right? So yeah, that I feel like that is it's evident in your work that you have an intimate connection with your pieces. And you're playing.
It's just like eating macrobiotic, like eating a macrobiotic diet. You know, like most of the food you eat is grown very near you, and it's not new in history. Like in the Renaissance, both Leonardo da Vinci and Durer, they both, I mean, they were contemporaries kind of, but they didn't live near each other. But they both came to the conclusion, like, I need to draw and paint things that are very near me, because those are the things I know about. So
yes, yeah,
it's powerful for me. And like it's funny how like a lot of times in classes I'll talk about like, okay, let's not think about these as projects, let's think about them as adventures. And like if quarantine has taught us anything, you know, we can have adventures, you know, in our house or anything.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, looking at each experience is
Mayo, what are you doing?
Is that your puppy?
Yeah, wait just a second. Mayo, come here.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of connecting. Oh, hi, pups.
Mayo's making a cameo. Hey, guys.
Yeah, well, speaking of of animals. Can you talk about your connection to animals? There's a lot of really
Oh yeah, yeah.
beautiful animal
So yeah,
imagery.
yeah. So there's certain animals I've used a lot in my work before, and then when I was in Japan, I was just completely floored because I've always loved foxes. I don't. It's just like I even picked a dog. It's not a fox terrier, but it looks like a fox. And so like when I was in Japan, they have these Inari shrines where they'll just have like hundreds and hundreds of statues of foxes, and it just completely blew me away. So I started using the idea of animal repetitions as a way of exploring um, kind of my relationship to the natural world and the biodiversity around me. And a couple of years ago, oh, here's another thing for the resources. I don't know if you guys have read this book, but there's a really great book by Donna Haraway called Staying with the Trouble.
Staying with trouble.
Staying with the Trouble. And
Okay.
so basically, she is a feminist writer that is kind of has problems with the Anthropocene idea that some scientists put forth. And so she's, I can't pronounce it, but I think it's called the Chitlutzine instead of the Anthropocene. That's what she calls it. And her general idea is that it's super important that people not work collaboratively with nature, that they put nature first, and that they realize that until we have a total kinship with everything in nature, like, as far as species goes, can the human species actually have kinship with animal species and plants and things like that? And she kind of puts forward that one of the ways we're going to have to do that is that we have to put their, you know, rights before our own, which is really hard, right?
Mm.
So used to doing things like getting on a plane and flying and stuff like that. But it's a great book, regardless of how you feel about it, because she's an amazing writer, and it's called Staying with the Trouble.
Staying with the trouble. And her name is Donna
Haraway, Haraway.
Okay.
She
I'm
teaches.
definitely going to add that to the list.
Yeah, it's such a good book. And I sent you some pictures of other books that have been really influential.
Yes, I'm going to add those.
Do you have more questions for me to answer?
Yeah. Oh, I love that we're on a roll here. I feel like the conversation is taking the road it wants to take naturally. And you've already answered some of the questions just on my list. I would love to hear one of my favorite questions, which you've begun, I think, to unravel and are probably going to unravel your whole life. But what is the big WY as far as why you continue to work with indigo? And you could even secondarily answer like how it's affected you, and how it trickles down into your community.
Yeah, I will say that indigo is one of the denominators that because I have this thing that I do as a university professor where I go usually somewhere between 10 and 16 high schools a year in Alabama. And I talk to them about what's happening as far as like nature in Alabama and biodiversity. And I'm a huge bird nerd, bird watcher. But like indigo is just the one thing, like I don't teach indigo ever anymore. I used to in the past, but the only place I ever teach it is at high schools now, because I've just really committed myself to the education and conversations with, basically kids.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing that I can talk to them about that, like immediately they gravitate towards it, and it's a deep mystery. They just love it, and it's amazing the conversations I've had with them and with arts educators because of it. Because like it is, especially in Alabama. I mean, it's easy to grow anywhere. I hope people are getting that because I've noticed other people have mentioned like it's so easy to grow, and even fresh leaf extraction. Like I typically don't do any fresh leaf extraction, but like a Bernadette was Puleo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She got me so interested in that. And like I knew how to do it, and I'd played with it, and and stuff like that. But typically, I'd always heard that you only use like a animal fiber, like silk or something like that. And I don't ever work with silk, so.
Sure.
But I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in trying to find like, because of paper making, like there's lots of ways that you can use raw materials of plants in paper making.
Yeah.
I have done a lot of like things where I've embedded stuff into paper, indigo,
Do you
like
ever
trying to get a
use,
reaction.
yeah, do you ever use the leaves or the stems in paper making?
I do, but it's weird because over time, like one thing I was experimenting with last year is like, can you take your dried leaves, put them into your paper making vat, make the paper, cure the paper, calendar the paper, which takes about 2 or 3 days, until it's totally dry. And then I was like, can I just put it up and make like chemicals and spray the paper and see what happens with the leaves? And it was kind of amazing. I should have brought a sample, but they're all at my studio, and I haven't been at my studio. But I think you posted a picture of my studio wall,
Yeah.
and in all those kinds of papers, like a lot of those are indigo dyed papers, and like,
Okay.
and so like, yeah, I've done a lot of experimentation, and I think I have a piece over here. This time. Like these are these large pieces of paper that have, I don't know if you guys can see, but
Yeah.
like I very luckily got a grant to go to SITMA, and I was working in a library that had all these old stencil designs, and I got to hand copy and make my own stencils, which I was able to bring home. So I made, like hundreds of these sheets of paper that have these stencils, and there's a big installation I had up in a place last year that was called The Sky as a Circle, and it was all these large pieces of paper.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I want to hear more about these paper experiments with making, the dried leaves and then the effect of manipulating them afterwards, or, changing their chemistry afterwards. That's really fascinating to me. I hope you'll share some pictures and some more stories about that later.
Yeah. And there's this book, which she's going to put in the resources, but it's called The Art of Paper Making, and it's by a French woman named Marie Laurent. And it's just a great book because she really talks about what plants are, why certain plants have more bast fiber than other bast fiber, which bast fiber is the fiber we want when we're making paper. But also, like in Japan, like if you're talking to like Kei Kawasaki at Gallery K in Kyoto or something, like like fabric like used to be made from bast fiber. And so like a lot of times when people see like antique indigo from Japan, which like I love the way that looks. So it's not so much that I use like a bunch of shibori or a bunch of other things, but like there's a certain tonality and texture to some old indigo fabric that I couldn't emulate with just by upcycling old pillowcases from the thrift store. So what I had to do was really think like, what is this almost like, complicated formula where I can get my indigo to look like that. And I am proud to say that a lot of times when people see things I made, they're like, is that actually antique indigo? Even though like, obviously it can't be, because that piece of fabric would be hundreds of dollars, which I'm sure there's some rich artists that could afford that, but you know what I mean? Like, but I had to really think about it. And so typically that's why I only use a ferrous vat now. And that's why I augment it in a certain way, because I want it to end up looking like old indigo. I love, and I love how in Japan they have the different stages of indigo, and it's all very schematically thought out. But I love old indigo, and it's not the darkest indigo, but it has a certain look to it, and that gives me like that's my carrot, Brittany. That's the carrot in front of me. I'm like, I'm after it, and I've gotten pretty good at it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I've gotten good at it. I don't know.
You'll
But
be
it's
95 someday, and someone will ask you about that carrot, and you'll say, "I'm just
yeah,
starting to get good at it."
yeah. It's true. It's so true. I'm such a newbie. I mean, I've been
That's a
doing it for
beautiful carrot. That's a beautiful carrot. I wanted to just show you some. I happen to have some indigo paper right here. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
It's a mix, and this was actually made by Skylar Demarinis, who's going to be in the series later,
Okay,
which is a
cool.
very
So awesome.
fun connection. He mixed it with, so he's a student and who's just finished his program at PNCA here in Portland, actually. And so he used kind of the mix of paper that they had that they kind of recycle, you know, when people do their mess ups and then they just dump the fiber back in. So he had a bunch of that paper, and then he mixed in the indigo stems. And so the green fleck, you can see the little fleck, that's the indigo stem from Vibrant Valley Farm, who's Kara, who was on the show
Yeah, totally.
number
Yeah.
2. So
Yeah,
that was
and
a really
Deborah, who was on the show already, has done a ton beautiful indigo paper. Beautiful stuff.
yes, yeah.
I don't
It's
know
really
her, but her work's beautiful. Oh my God.
it's really exciting to be able to make both the medium and the application all in one plant. You know, that's an exciting thing for me to think about. Is
Yeah.
I haven't done much paper making myself, but I love the idea of you know, making the fiber, the
I even tried to use indigo because there's some leaves of some things that you can make beautiful paper out of. Like the thing in Alabama that I always have my tendrils out for is like when people's hosta plants die back in the fall. Like that is one of my favorite things to make paper out of. It makes the most beautiful, almost like Japanese kitakata paper. It's beautiful, hosta plants.
pasta.
But like also like sunflower plants, like a lot of times, you know, like people will talk about like, because I use the stem and branches of the okra plant um,
Okay.
to make paper, but I also like the root of the okra plant. That's my sizing. So like I'll, you know, because you know how okra gets gooey and stuff. The root of the plant actually gets really gooey, which means it's a great sizing or
Yeah.
glue to hold the paper together. But like
Okay.
hosta leaves are things, and I did Hollander beet indigo leaves only. It didn't make great paper, but
Mm.
I'm excited about using it as like a decorative finish and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And the weird thing is that um, you've made pastels, but like the other thing that has been really great is to make paste paper with indigo pigment. It's really beautiful. So like in the same way that you and I make pastels, you
Mm-hmm.
can make a pigmented paint that's been used for thousands of years as book covers. Like when you open up an old book and it has that combed stuff, that's what we call a paste paper.
Okay.
So you can use indigo pigment really well for paste papers. So.
Excellent. There are so many rabbit holes that I want to dive into with you. And I'm sure other people do too.
Well,
I'm
the paste
curious.
paper thing is so fun because like if you're teaching about the history of paste papers, you get to say the Moravian Sisters of Herrnhut, which was this group of women in Moldavia basically that invented paste paper and rose it to a huge level. And they're just amazing. Like if you look at their paste papers, they're so
Uh-huh.
beautiful. And like
How
one of their paste papers is just them slamming down their fist and twisting their fist on the paper, and it makes this amazing mark. It's so fun.
wow.
Yeah.
How would we find out more about that?
If you Google Moldavian Sisters of Herrnhut, Hernhutt, it will come up.
Moldavian Sisters of
Herrnhut,
Bernhut.
Hernhutt.
Okay, I'm writing this down.
Are the history of paste
Okay.
paper, you know.
Okay,
So
wow.
you can do it on fabric. It's a fabric treatment too, as well as, and you can do it on leather or on paper.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Like I said, so many rabbit holes, so many funny trails to explore. Thanks for
Because I'm
sharing
so
all the
old. Yeah.
um, yeah, so one more kind of question that I wanted to ask you. I feel like you've told us so many stories, but could you actually, yeah, this is a really good question. Any advice for the first time foray into either indigo growing or dyeing? Any advice for that person?
I would say be nice to yourself and don't, like there's a time to be deadly serious and there's a time to be super playful.
Mm,
And like, what could be more fun than getting a bunch of friends together and doing indigo stuff? Like, I think there's a deep cultural need for that right now. And it addresses in a very pointed, quick way so many things that a lot of us are concerned about. So,
mm,
like, if you have access to a BIPOC, a people of color community or Black community or queer community, get everyone together and invite people and like do things with them. And it's like to grow indigo and then do I'm not belittling fresh leaf extraction, because like I'm excited about trying all these crazy things with fresh leaf extraction, but anybody could do that very quickly. Like in
yeah,
indigo is it's literally, I think cosmos and marigolds are easy to grow too, but like of all the dye plants you're going to grow, it grows crazy. And one year, I think you even commented on it, but one year I didn't even plant indigo because it just kept coming back because I'd never get all the seeds and it just self seeds. And I think it was 4 years ago I had to start over because everything had just, it looked as bad as my madder, like sometimes madder grows so much it just gets crazy,
yeah,
you know. And so
it is. I love that you mentioned that there is something so mysterious about this plant and really magical and endless, but also it is simultaneously the most accessible dye in that you can pick it and use it instantly. You don't even need to make it into a tea like marigolds or cosmos, right? I mean, a lot of
right,
those plants can be
yeah.
pressed
But
and
but
powdered.
also like I would encourage a lot of people because like, and it's fun, it's fine if you want to order chemicals and stuff, but like just like anything else, like I hope you'll consider doing an organic vat, like just consider doing that even from the get-go, because once you get into it, it's not bad, you know, even if you only have pH strips.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
Or
really
even if
not
you
bad. And
don't.
there's and also like we were talking before we came live that like how much we love the indigo and the fiber community in general, because it's not like there's a bunch of jerks out there. Like if you have a question, just ask someone, just DM them in a respectful way. And
Mhm.
that's everything to me. And like look for hidden knowledge in your community. Like there's so much amazing stuff out there. Like that's what
Yeah,
I'm.
yes, that's great advice. Be gentle with yourself, be playful, and ask. Yeah, that's the epitome, I think, of this group. It started with me asking a simple question and a bunch of people willing to respond, and then asking more questions, and then more people respond. So that's the beauty of this community. Really is. It's just based on this.
Yeah, and hold on to your authenticity. Like, don't, like one of my things about, because I lead this queer birding group that's for queer and BIPOC people only, and like we had to form that because like sometimes it can be abrasive to be in a community that's not soft, and like there's people that just want to know everything and want to say like, oh, I know exactly that bird. Let me tell you everything I know about that bird. But like, like sometimes that can be hard for people. But find your community and find the people that can be soft with you and that you feel
Mhm.
comfortable around.
Mm.
It'll be great. And even trying to be soft with yourself, because like if you're not soft with yourself and you're not comfortable, you're not going to be having fun. And that's the whole, you have to, if you're not having fun, it's not going to be driven forward. And that's what we want to happen. So
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, there's a real intention behind indigo that the plant really asks you, invites you to be community driven. I think that's the other really beautiful piece about indigo. Like I could never do my harvests alone, and I don't want to, but also physically, I'm always really thankful that people want to help and be a part of it. And I love that piece about it. It is very, it's a communal, I feel like it's a very communal plant. It really invites action in it in a circular way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one years ago, I think this was like 4 or 5 years ago, and like a friend of mine that is where I get my buckthorn bark from for dye. Like he decided he was going to grow some indigo, and he just brought a whole like it was a huge amount of indigo to my studio, and I had just harvested, and I was just like, what is happening? You know, like, and I just reached out on Facebook and said like, okay, you guys, if you want some indigo, if you'll help me, you know, like
Yeah.
put this in these old hoses and start this extraction, like I'm going to share it with everybody. So, and people
Oh,
showed
yeah.
up. It was great. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I love the community that experience too. We've been doing that here a couple of years now where we pool our pigment together, and um, that's such a special feeling to share indigo that's been grown, right here, to have other people who maybe they don't have the space to grow it, but they can be a part of dying in it and um, have that connection. Yeah, that community connection it's really everything. It's everything to me. It's the reason why I love interacting with all of you every day in this group. Um, so can you tell us just a little bit more about how we would reach you, how we would find out? You've mentioned that, people have sent you messages and you love chatting with people, and you're willing to chat with people about the indigo iron vat if people have questions. What's the best
Yeah.
way to get in touch with you?
The good news is that not that many people have my last name. So it's not that I'm known or anything, but if you Google my last name, I come up. So it's really
Okay,
easy. But like most people contact me through Instagram or through my website, either one of them.
great. Wonderful. I want to check in just with the group. There's a lot of folks watching, and I'm going to see if there's any questions. I'm going to mute our double. You can hear us talking live because it's a little delay here. So let's see. Um, love the cyanotype indigo connection. What do you call that? There's another word you're using.
I just I don't know that I call it anything because I do the same thing with like if it's called a Van Dyke. But like, you know, I would say if people are interested in that, like just look at the history of photography, like Fox Talbot and all that, and like see how he played with things because, and there's still photographers that don't use chemicals, they use plant-based things. And the big thing I'm doing, which I'm excited about, is that like, you know, typically if you use natural dyes as what we call an anthotype,
Hmm.
so an anthotype is like when you would take like turmeric and mix it with vodka and coat a sheet of paper or fabric with it and then expose it to sun. It would be photoreactive, and but it wouldn't stay. Like, but like since about 4 years ago, I was like, do I not know enough about mordants and about indigo chemicals and natural dye chemicals that I could figure this out? And so I've been doing all these experiments, and and so like that's why Aaron came the other day, and like I'm getting to the point now where like I've had some things that I've done and they seem the same after 3 or 4 years. I've never had them in like bright sunlight, but I've had them on shirts that I've worn, and so like it's just something I'm playing with. So like there's certain plants that definitely lend themselves as natural dyes. Like I grow alkanet. Do you guys know that?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
alkanet. So like that's like madder. You grow it north, south, east, west, and you harvest it 4 times a year from different sides of the plant so it doesn't grow die.
Uh-huh.
And so like alkanet is like a pretty good photoreactive dye, and pineapple juice and
Oh.
Yellow dock is a really good one. Spinach is pretty good.
Deborah had a question about the dock. She wants to know if you ferment it.
The curly dock. So I think the dock I use, Deborah, is a curly dock, and I only use the root. I don't use the leaves or the stems.
Okay.
And I do not ferment it. I do that thing where, you know how certain natural dyes you can fully boil and cook down. With dock, what I do is I get it boiling, almost boiling, and then I turn it off and leave it for 6 hours, and then I boil it again, and then I distill it, and then I put it into an alembic. Do you guys know would they know what an alembic is? So you know, like those old enamel coffee pots that you used to see cowboys using, like hey, get the wagon train, we need our coffee, like, and so like those percolators are like in France, we have our espresso thing. Anytime where you can put the plant material in that thing, and the water comes up and it comes around. So that's what we call an alembic. And that, if you've never used one, like, let me just tell you, if you're interested in natural dyes, like that is like, like it's crazy. So you can really get a much richer, and because I always talk about like acorn caps, and people are like, my acorn cap dye never looks like that, or it's because they don't use an alembic and they don't do it multiple times. So like I'll distill the liquid and then put fresh acorn caps in, or dock root, and just keep doing it over and over again. And I learned about that in one of the other books you're going to post, which my friend Larry Lou Foster told me about, which is called The Craft of Old Master Drawings. And it's just a really great book. It's by James Watrous. Can you guys see that? I think you.
I can see the main title. I'll make sure I post that picture you sent me too.
But wow, and that's how originally, when I was an undergrad student, Brittany, in I'm about to show you how old I am. Never mind. In the 80s, that's when I learned about how to make pastels out of plant pigments. That's the book I learned from. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I can't wait to explore that book too. Yeah, I've really been enjoying.
Oh, you're gonna love it. Because there's lots of great like natural dye and pigment and ink books out there, but like this is what they did in the 16th century. And so like, and also I will just say, like, the history of alchemy, like me exploring that, I've learned so much about, because that was a big part of it. So like I learned a lot about what plants are like sister plants that you can go together, or like, like a lot of times I'll use the rhizome of the iris plant to augment dyes slightly. And I learned that from alchemy, and so like if I want to make, like if I'm making a Cosmos marigold dye and it doesn't quite turn out yellow, like it's almost like you can boil the rhizome of the iris in it, and it's like it adds opacity, it adds strength to it. So there's a bunch of plants like that work.
Wow. Yeah, really partnering. I love the idea of like sister plants, and really, we think so much about separating colors, probably because of synthetics, right? We want to separate them. We want to put them yellow or a particular kind. We try to name them all, right? We want to name each shade. And I think
it's like making black fabric, like, because obviously if you use indigo and walnut together enough times, it's going to go black. But like there's so many ways to do that, and it's fascinating to talk to. I think I literally had a conversation one time when I was teaching, and it was after dinner, and like I talked to some woman, I can't remember who it was, but like we talked for like 3 hours about how to make blacks, and like it's just like, so we geeked out or whatever. So
yeah, I really like the idea of partnering plants together to make a shade, rather than trying to keep everything so separate, right? Like you would in a, you're thinking of it, or I'm almost thinking of it like in the RIP package dye world, everything is separated neatly, cleanly, right? And so in the plant world, and then just in nature, it's not that way, right?
Right. But also like, Michel Garcia, like he talks a lot about the difference between using different mordants and different dyes. but also just between different dyes, like just layering different dyes can be
Yeah.
amazing sometimes. So.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's a whole series called Beyond Mordants. If
Exactly.
some people are really familiar with it in the group, but if you haven't heard of it, Michelle Garcia has a DVD series called Beyond Mordants. I'll write that down in our list too, just because it's really fascinating. Look at sister plants, really, like plants that you may already have growing in your backyard that can be assisting the color, the pigment.
And also it's fun because he talks a lot. I've never met him, but he talks a lot about things that are very close to me because, you know, my grandparents are from the south of France. So like when people immigrated to the United States, they brought certain plants with them that were so crucially important to them that now we think of as weeds, which is just insane to me. So like if you see a mullein plant growing somewhere, like people think of that as a weed, and like that's one of the plants that was brought here, same as indigo basically, but it doesn't have the tragic kind of aspect.
Yeah, we have a huge in Oregon where I live, we have a huge amount of what the Department of Agriculture here would label as invasive mullein and invasive woad. We have particularly in the southern part of Oregon, we do have these two plants. And what's interesting to me, when I went to visit them last summer with a project I did with a couple other artists here, they grow right next to each other. Like woad and mullein were friends in this landscape where basically fire had taken a lot of plants out. And then crews had come in to clean the area, really stripping it back to bare land. And as you know, the earth is always going to put a Band-Aid, and weeds are that Band-Aid for, open, exposed dirt, right? And they're really doing their job. They're doing exactly what they're meant to do. And the two Band-Aid plants we saw the most were that mullein and the woad, which I thought was really interesting. It was really interesting to see that.
It sounds like England.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to check into, there were a few more questions. Oh, someone asked what pH meter you use. Do you have
you mean who made it? I'd have to go look. Is there a name on it? I've had it for like 7 or 8 years, but there's so many of them. Anasco, is that one of them, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one I have is a Blue Lab. I'm not even sure. We've actually, Georgianne Alex is asking this question. Georgianne, I will tag you in several posts we've had about pH meters. Lots of great recommendations. I can definitely direct you there.
If possible, don't buy the one that costs $35. Buy the one that costs $80. I think someone told me that once, and like I've had mine for at least 7 or 8 years, and it's great. So I think mine was made by a company called Anasco, but I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. We can always you can go back and look and comment too. So I'm just gonna check and see if there are any other questions that folks have here. A lot of people saying hello and excited to see your work and excited to hear from you, paper making. So someone was asking about mulberries, or the mulberry plant, or the tree rather. So would these be the same mulberry trees that silkworms eat off of in the sericulture?
Yeah, the mulberry thing I use is in paper making, I typically use the red mulberry or the white mulberry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many crossover plants we have with Japan and Korea, and not so much Cambodia or Laos, but like, I know a lot of people always think of like Japan with indigo, but like if you ever can make it to Laos or Cambodia, their indigo culture is amazing. And I've never gotten to Africa, but obviously I would love to go. And India too, I've seen it in India, but for some reason I was just taken with the actual the culture of indigo in Laos and Cambodia, and what they do with it is just amazing. Some of those weavings. So.
And are they primarily using? Do you know which kind of?
I think it's Senbon. I think it's Senbon. Or,
Okay. Uh-huh.
yeah.
So yeah, they're using the Persicaria tinctoria plants.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, there's lots of other really nice comments. I'll let you hop on later if you want and respond to anything, any other questions people might have. And I just want to thank you for doing this with me today, for chatting with me, for telling your stories, for sharing your insights. I really learned
What a
a lot.
fun lunchtime.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone watching. Thanks for all the great questions. We do this every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Next week, we're going to hear from Liz Spencer in California. So join us next week. You can find that the whole series, if you missed the other episodes, I've now pinned them in the announcement section. So you can just go click on announcements. You can also click on albums and click on the blue biographies. There's a square for each interview. You can click on it and there's a link there to watch the video interview. So thanks again to everyone who joined us this morning. Thanks again, Doug. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Brittany. I love the Facebook page. Thanks for everything you do for our community. It's amazing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I'm excited to chat with you more soon. All right, we're going to say goodbye. Have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you in the Indigo group soon. Cheers.